This isn't really a video I care to make because a lot of the drama that stemmed from this and the results of it are really weird, but I do have a lot of people stopping to ask, my thoughts on VHS sunsetting and what exactly went wrong. Instead of answering these kinds of questions every single time, whether I'm on Twitter or stream or Discord or in another chat, it'd just be easier to make a timeline of some things that hurt VHS and my feelings as one of the first and former rewinders. But this is a very lengthy video and it's also very discussion heavy, so just sit back, relax, and take a watch, but it is also in timeline order. But VHS was another game in the horror ASIM genre, 4v1 styled with teens and a monster, but you could fight back against said monster by crafting weapons, also known as stigmas. Many saw it as a competitor to Dead by Daylight, which is known as like the king of ASIMs, but I never saw it that way personally. I've always been a firm believer that both could exist and be healthy, but it was definitely one of the first games that I was interested in a very long time. I was really excited for VHS, I had a lot of fun playing it, but there were some hiccups along the way and then things that happened like controversies that just kind of hammered VHS, and it was one of those death by 1,000 cuts type of things. So the story of VHS starts about late 2021. This is when a lot of hype for VHS was being built up, and they had a couple of people invited to the media test. This is including people like TricksterShadow, Jaee, Granny, TechSmith. And after a little bit of hype built up for VHS, it would be November 25th, 2021 that the first official wave of keys would be distributed across the community. Now, this was a random lottery system for people winning keys, but I don't think that this was the best way for VHS to distribute keys personally. I said that at the very start as well, and that's not just because I was salty, because I did get in about like the 5th or 6th wave of keys, but a lot of huge content creators were really wanting the chance to try VHS out because it was the new wave of things, but instead of handing it to like bigger content creators, I understand it feels nice to, let people go out and, explore the game for themselves, but really a lot of the focus and a lot of the attention that would be brought to the game and the advertising of the game would be through those big content creators, but it was lacking a lot of that very early on, which led people to be a little bit jaded in a sense because, they weren't getting their keys as fast, and by the time they had ended up getting it, a little bit of the hype died down, so this probably wasn't the best system. And then another major incident that happened was February 13th, 2022, the VHS servers went down for over 100 days. Now, when this first started happening, everybody assumed it was server issues just due to the sheer amount of people that were being let in from the keys. But at the same time, it turns out somebody ended up causing a massive collapse of the VHS servers simply by exploiting a security flaw, which was really crazy to think about. And of course, as 100 days went on, the devs couldn't really work on much, but we were sure that they were still planning out content. I mean, they even told us, that they were planning on a lot of content during those 100 days, and we would just have to wait and see over and over again. And I think that them having content lined up was awesome, but it turns out that the content that we got was just cosmetics, purely cosmetics, which really felt like a slap in the face to a lot of people. And then months down the line, VHS actually did end up coming back online, which is super exciting, but unfortunately they decided to go for another round of beta, which I also think really hurt a lot of the hype. Instead of getting early access like we thought we would, it went straight back into beta, and then we also had the key lottery system again, which left a lot of people feeling frustrated. So just a lot of the same feelings coming back. But this also was really upsetting because despite them resetting progress for all players, they didn't change the balance of monsters still. So we had very experienced players going against newer monsters specifically, and it turned a lot of people off from playing. And this was like their first time playing. I mean, if I loaded up into the game and then there was not much that I could do, not very good tutorial system, none of that stuff, and I immediately got stomped, I would probably just uninstall and say, maybe this isn't for me. And this led to a lot of people being frustrated because gameplay loops were pretty much the same, content was getting a little stale after months of having the same thing. But moving forward, June 6th, the official VHS Discord and Twitter got hacked. So it seems like they ran into security issues again. I'm not sure how this happened, but speculation was that essentially one of the moderators clicked something fishy, it spread in the Discord, and then other people clicked on it, and then that led to the credentials of the other accounts getting compromised as well. And it was especially bad in the Discord because the devs and the mods had their roles removed and the hackers took over, and then we're adding everyone, and in screenshots like this, you can see what kind of messages they were posting, and a lot of people sadly fell for it because, I mean, they didn't really suspect anything. They had no idea what was happening. So it spread really bad, but also really quick. And thus, people's accounts were getting compromised left and right. It led to a lot of people losing trust in VHS as a whole, from the Discord to the Twitter and other accounts, but also leaving the Discord, and then also people's compromised accounts spreading to outside circles not even related to VHS. It was a huge mess, but we had a lot of people spam calling, you know, Discord support as well as Twitter support and other support accounts, blah, 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 trying to get VHS's accounts back to them. And I believe this whole process took about a week, but it was super overwhelming, not only for the devs, I imagine, but also the community. And it seemed like VHS just really couldn't catch a break, so it was really sad. Then July 18th, 2022 rolled around, and this was when early access for VHS came out. But at this point, again, like I had mentioned before, some of the previous issues were already there, but this was especially strange because despite early access coming around, there was no real marketing or advertising for VHS, and a lot of people, including myself, noticed this. It was mainly a lot of big content creators and then medium level and smaller level content creators promoting a lot out of VHS through maybe YouTube videos, you know, TikToks, Twitter posts and stuff, which was fine, I guess, but I feel like they definitely had the budget to market. They just didn't feel like it, I guess. I'm not really sure what happened there. But I guarantee you, if they actually decided to advertise early on, even if it was a small budget, like it could have been simple Twitter advertising, it could have been something simple by, you know, having a Steam feature, just something, I guarantee you would have done a lot better. And despite the game being in early access, again, Monster was still largely unchanged for the most part. But what really made this all tie together and make it really sting was that there was an era of toxic positivity during this time. So sadly, during this era, we had a lot of people that ignored these things and started a cycle where every issue consistently got ignored, and even any amount of criticism meant that people were wanting the game to fail or people were being too harsh on the devs. This will continue to go on until the death of the game and was a really, really heavy contributor. I feel like if more people were critical, the necessary changes to keep the game flowing a lot quicker definitely could have happened. Then, just a couple weeks after the early access announcement, we had July 26, 2022 roll around, and this was when the Rewinders program was announced. And me and several other people, including my partner TricksterShadow, were invited, and I felt really nice about it and thought maybe since they implemented a program this early on, they were serious and they were confident and the changes would come rolling around. But as the program went on, it was the key system all over again, where people became jaded and upset after each wave of Rewinders was released. And so much petty drama came from this in the community where, you know, people were like, so-and-so should be a rewinder, or so-and-so shouldn't be a rewinder, and this and that. It was a lot of bickering back and forth. And around July 30th, 2022, this is where it starts getting good and like my hopes start going up even more, where they add the queue incentive. But in the long run, it did not become that effective because the queue incentive, the reward just wasn't enough, and I remember a lot of people suggesting that it should be a little bit higher because, again, the monster roll was very tedious, and in order to get people to play Monster, you really, really had to push a lot. But it also should have been there from day one if they weren't going to add heavy balance changes for Monster in the first place. Then we had September 8th, 2022, and new content finally dropped. It was the Eviscerator the map, but also the new monster, Deathwire, which I thought was really fun. This update was nice, and I enjoyed playing a little bit more because the mechanics of Deathwire made it so that you could deal with the ambushes a lot easier, which was something that I really struggled with whenever I was playing. But it brought a lot of people back, and then it slowly started to dwindle yet again. And then September 29th got even worse when Sam Gee, the community manager, decided to leave VHS, which left the VHS community feeling a little bit rocky. Sam leaving really hurt Hellbent's communication, as she was one of the only direct lines of dev communication, and after Sam left, communication across the board was very slow. There weren't nearly as many stops in chat, Discord questions and answers, Twitter replies, and announcements. Many saw Sam leaving as a little bit of a warning sign as she jumped ship to avoid crashing alongside VHS. I'm not sure if any of that is true, and I don't really want to speculate either because it's unnecessary drama. Her life could have just been conflicting, or she just didn't feel like staying. I don't necessarily think anything was wrong, but this definitely hurt a lot of people. October 11, 2022 came around, and this was obviously during Halloween. But as it approached, there was not so new content. There was a medium-sized update. It was basically just cosmetics and some map reskinning, which was cool, but not much else. October 29th, 2022 came around, and this is when both TricksterShadow and Jaee left the Rewinders program. During this time, there were a lot of frustrations between both of them as they had left their primary audience to swap to something different, which was super hard to do for content creation. but VHS bought both of them really far and they were really invested. It was sort of an eggs in one basket situation, but it made sense because of the sheer amount of views and success stemming from the initial boom of VHS. But despite them constantly holding the game up as two of the biggest content creators for it, the weight of it was ultimately too much. Took note that a lot of players were consistently overwhelming with questions and demands after the fall off of the communications. They were expected to show off and play strictly VHS. They dealt with community backlash from their much needed criticism towards VHS, while also dealing with other aspects of their life, like their mental health. I can only imagine how much of a toll it took on them, so I understand it, I really do. Especially when they held up their end of the bargain by propping and hyping up VHS so much, with not much in return, with help and essentially failing them. Even worse, both were mocked across chats, Twitter, and Discord from what I saw, despite bringing so much towards VHS. But because of toxic positivity surrounding the community, I guess criticism from Jaee and Trickster felt hostile. December 12th, 2022 had Reggie's release, but the player count was still gradually going down towards the 200s. Not much hype was made for it, and not even I bothered to play around this time because queues were so bad that I could spend 20 plus minutes on stream waiting for a lobby, and Monster was still just as stressful to the point I didn't even want to play that either. It was absolutely killing my average and slowly killing my stream, and as a full-time content creator, I just couldn't really support it anymore, which I felt bad about. And after a lot of the community already fell off, many stopped playing anyway, so I played less and less around this time beforehand. And then around December, early-ish 2022, they decided to actually release their newest monster, Anomaly, via private screening. Private screening was essentially like their version of private lobbies, which I'm also not sure why they decided to release, because this would just make queue times already worse than they were, meaning that it was gonna be mostly just friends playing. And this would basically mean the rest of the player population would be stuck in a queue simulator, which again was not good. January 2nd, 2023, I myself left the Rewinders program after being stuck in a consistent cycle with VHS with this message. I was completely honest and open about it. I loved VHS at the time, but I just couldn't support it in myself, and giving up a space in the program to allow somebody that, could feel it a lot better, felt a lot better in the long run. I still hope nothing but the best for VHS and the devs at the time. I really missed it. It's just, it wasn't sustainable. Around late January 2023 was when I was informed by a mutual streamer pal that their version of marketing was reaching out to streamers with keys for Anomaly instead of actually fixing a budget for marketing. This was Running Man actually, who was playing consistently to keep the game alive with over 200 viewers on average. But he was emailed by one of the devs and asked whether or not he had tried their game in the first place, and then they proceeded to give him a code for Anomaly, which led to his frustration, and he just uninstalled the game. He was one of the last few big content creators for VHS, and they just blew it. But beforehand, like I mentioned with communications, they would stop around Twitch chats and actually check on the community, but at some point after Sam left, they stopped, and I guess they just didn't care. February 1st, 2023, there was a huge ball drop by VHS and the devs, and this would permanently destroy what little trust was left. I'm talking about one of their biggest controversies. It was this date that the VHS devs were made completely aware that one of the Rewinders was actively leaking their NDA, degrading and stream sniping other VHS community members, insisting they would never let them become Rewinders or grow in the community, but was also exposed for being both a predator and a groomer. There was an instance where this person, the Rewinder, was begging to send explicit images and flirting with someone in the community, despite being told they were uncomfortable and did not want to receive those types of images. Yet, they were sent anyways, and they casually dropped in a conversation that they were in their mid-20s but had previously dated a 17-year-old, but it wasn't weird according to them because their family was okay with it. Which all of it was wildly inappropriate, but especially alarming considering the characters of VHS were primarily young teens, with the youngest, Faith, canonically being 14 years old, and the player base consisted of a younger audience overall. Many, including myself, were shocked to hear about this person. I had played games with them, we had both stopped in each other's streams, I considered myself a pretty good mutual with them, but I just felt disgusted. But I really couldn't believe their reaction and their response to this. And despite a clear admission of that person, VHS devs chose to suspend said Rewinder instead of immediately removing them from the community and the Rewinder status and all that other jazz. They stated they had already reached out and talked about everything except for the accusations of them being a predator and a groomer because they were just not aware. And that rewinder apologized and owned up to what they called mistakes. But this turned out to be a lie, as the initial poster that exposed them sent the document 2 weeks in advance detailing everything before they went public, meaning they knew. And on top of that, they decided to not act on it because they said it's difficult for us to get involved when things happen outside of our game. It's pretty bad. As you can see in the screenshot, this is exactly what happened. And I understand if they didn't want to get involved for petty drama, but this was a lot more than petty drama. This was something serious, and I'm shocked and I'm super disappointed at the way that they handled it. After that, VHS left a very sour taste, not only in my mouth, but plenty of other mouths as well. February 2nd, 2023, the following day, that rewinder was removed and they followed up with this, but only after having pressure from the community. And in my opinion, they should have immediately removed the rewinder after they were made aware the first time. But that didn't happen. Oh well, I guess. February 9th was the announcement of the Danger Sense update, which was fantastic for VHS, but it was a little too late. The player count had dipped to just the 100s, which was mostly dedicated players. But if this update had come out at the start of at least the second beta, VHS definitely could have felt more positive effects in the long run. But that wasn't the case, and we'll never know why. February 22nd, 2023 came along, more drama for the dwindling community, where prominent players were getting doxxed and targeted with hate speech. It was an unfortunate event, but players at the very least were warned and they had support from VHS. Also the tight-knit community, which was really sweet. Then March 1st, 2023 had the controversy involving me. I hate talking about this because the situation was really shitty to deal with in the first place, and funnily enough, upon joining the Discord just to make this video and get all the announcements and stuff in actual timeline order, I realized there were a lot of shady comments being thrown around about both me and Trickster, which was really weird despite me being in the right. And despite Trickster leaving the server much earlier than I ever did. And I don't mind people talking about the subject of the dress, but throwing the shady comments as a whole is just completely unnecessary and definitely drags the situation out. And even more funny is that most of them are from the same person that also said this when I confronted them. Okay buddy, yikes. But basically, when I was a rewinder for VHS, the plan was to have a cosmetic made for myself for being a part of the program, but since I had left, that was made null. My cosmetic was nearly finished by the time I had left the program, but instead of scrapping it, they took my design and they admitted to changing certain elements and textures to repurpose it. I drew this from scratch. I drew all of this stuff out of my own imagination, by hand and whatnot, so I was pretty offended. And on top of that, they were also making profit from my watered down design. So I basically did the job of a concept artist for free. They didn't even hint nor credit me for my design, and they wrongfully profited off of it. I was super pissed. And it doubly hurt because they didn't even have the decency to message me or ask for permission or negotiations. Eventually, I was reached out to by one of the devs who apologized, and here's the full screenshot of our messages as a whole for context, since people have been saying I've twisted the narrative or I'm trying to manipulate people to be on my side. I don't have to fucking do that. People have also brought up that in Hellbent's terms of service, which was this, that they basically don't accept nor consider user submissions in any form from players, but as a rewinder, this didn't apply to me. Why? Because when I onboarded, I signed the initial NDA, code of conduct, and program overview as a rewinder specifically. So you can stop saying that now. It did not apply to me. Not just that, but Hellbent literally already admitted fault. People also ask me why I just didn't ask privately. Why? So it could be ignored like the previous situation until it escalated? They didn't even bother to contact me in private about stealing my design, again, nor making money off of it publicly. Either way, there's no point in arguing over it now. However, the program is over and the game is dead. I was right, they were wrong. Go find something else to be mad about. It seemed the community stayed pretty awful. It happened to Trickster, it happened to Jaee, and then it happened to me. April 2023, around this point, 2 to 3 devs were confirmed to have left. 2 of them formed their own studio, and then the other just simply parted ways. The group of 100 dedicated players or so continued to play, but VHS's growth was stagnant and news was practically radio silent at this point, aside from Anomaly releasing around this time as well. But again, the hype for it had died down so much that the Steam charts didn't really do anything. There was no real bump in players and nobody moved. May 5th, 2023, VHS announced some odd news where, despite there not being an update for an extended amount of time, they were moving resources and devs to other projects to help keep VHS afloat, but everything was okay, so they said, which gave many the impression that the game would be shutting down soon, and it would only be a matter of time. June 9th, 2023, the awaited announcement from VHS came online that VHS was sunsetting, the Discord was to be deleted, but is now just in a stagnant state and archived, and that they have no plans of returning to VHS at any point. Despite this project being in the works for over 5 years, it was ending and left a lot of us disappointed, but not surprised. So there you have it, a full timeline of VHS throughout the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think I'll miss VHS to a degree because I love the initial creativity and the work ethic of the devs, but there were too many bad decisions, mistakes, and so many controversies that really caused this game to fall apart. And it feels especially bad because a lot of people are starting to realize, in the long run, if they never really planned on advertising or marketing, what exactly was their plan? Was the plan to just get as much money out of the user base as possible and then go on about it? Because how do you have this project in development for 5 entire years and then this is just the most that you make out of it? But also, it was their own fault. Like, a lot of the controversies and whatnot were legitimately on them. And it started out so good, but then it ended so bad. But regardless, it is what it is, and VHS is no more. The end. But before I go, I also have a lot more that I want to talk about, but I can't until my NDA is up, so expect something else around September 8th, 2023, and I'll see you then. Bye, guys.